week, a radical new plan or the same old tune that was defeated back in 2014. I'll talk to the man who led his country closer to independence than anyone else, Alex Salmond. A lot has happened to Mr Salmond since then. What does he make of his former protege's new push? And what is it like to be held in an Egyptian jail? Activist Sanaa Seif was sentenced to 18 months for spreading false news. Her brother's still being detained in and out of prison in Egypt for his role in the Arab Spring uprising of 2011. Sanaa and her family are fighting for his release. But should the British government be helping too? The family are, after all, British citizens. We hear their story. The Brexit agreement was put into turmoil this week when the government here decided to override the Northern Ireland Protocol. The EU Commission's called it unrealistic. I went to Brussels to speak to Vice President Maroš Šefčovič and get his reaction. Vice President, thanks for talking to us today. Let's start with the trying week. It's the difficult week. But before we do, can we reflect a bit, or you reflect on the relationship between London and Brussels? How bad do you think the current UK-EU relations are now compared with recent history?
From one side, I have to say that our cooperation on Ukraine and the global challenges is remarkable. This is how we would like to see it, because I always repeat that for us, the UK is a strategic partner, it's ally, it's eternal neighbor, and it's a very important commercial partner as well. So we would like really to kind of move our relationship on the greener pasture to really have that very well-functioning bilateral relationship. And of course, therefore, I have to say that if we are going to discuss still the pertinent Brexit issue, it's a pity that we have to spend so much time on them, especially when we need to build and consolidate this Western unity.
Is the Brexit difficulties bleeding into other areas of cooperation? Is it casting a shadow?
It is, because, of course, the EU-UK relationship is very massive. I mean, so we cooperate on lots of fields, and if you have the situation where after very arduous and difficult negotiations and agreement on the agreements like withdrawal agreement, Northern Ireland Protocol, and then, of course, the trade and cooperation agreements. And we thought that we've done that, we agreed upon it, we ratified it, and we are still talking about it. And, of course, what is extremely sensitive for us and what is indeed very damaging for our relationship is this constant breaching of the international law, and that's something what we've been not used to from the UK.
On the breaching and that making it difficult from a European Union perspective, over the past few days, members of the European Parliament and the Darling Island have said they can't trust Prime Minister Boris Johnson or Foreign Secretary Liz Truss. Their words not to be taken. Is that your view as well?
On that foundation, we built the trade and cooperation agreement. It's very much based on trust, because I think for the first time in the history of the European Union, we actually accepted that the external controls and checks on our external border will be actually performed by UK authorities. This, breaching of the international law makes it very difficult, and it's very damaging to our mutual trust.
Does it make it difficult for you to trust these people when you're trying to negotiate?
I always do the positive attitude to my interlocutors, and I have always respect for them, because they are representing their country, they are representing their political interest, and I always hope for the better. I mean, that's, I think, what we diplomats need to do. But of course, I have to say that since March of the last year, we have permanent threat of unilateral measures, Article 16 announcements, and now we have the draft bill, which is clearly illegal, and which is, of course, making our life here very difficult. And therefore, I hope that with the proposals which we put on the table yesterday. We fleshed them out in very concrete form, that we can bring our UK partners back to the negotiating table, because I think we need to find the good solution.
Well, let's get on to some of the proposals that the UK and the European Union have suggested. You just said it again. You are convinced that the UK has acted illegally in laying this legislation in the UK Parliament that will overwrite parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol agreed in the withdrawal treaty by the European Union and the UK back in 2020. To quote your comments yesterday, you said there's no legal or political justification whatsoever for changing unilaterally an international agreement. The UK government, you know, has a very different perspective to you. They say that this has legal justification. They use the doctrine of necessity in international law, which allows a state to act in the event of a grave risk to their interests, which is what the UK government has concluded. So I put it to you that that might be your perspective, but that's certainly not the perspective of the government in London.
I honestly think that you don't have to be a lawyer to see that this draft bill is clearly illegal, and I just would give you one very clear example. I mean, there is no way that the UK would decide what kind of goods may enter into the European single market. Our UK counterparts, they knew perfectly well what they are signing up to, and I have to say that if it comes to the Northern Ireland specific solution, the Northern Ireland Protocol, it was express wish of this UK government. So they've been negotiating with us line by line. We've been jointly looking for the solutions, how to protect peace in Northern Ireland, how to avoid the hard border, how to make sure the Good Friday Belfast Agreement is respected in all its dimensions, and the protocol was the result. So that's the only solution after arduous negotiation and looking at it from all the sides, which is now being undermined. So what we are offering here is permanent solution. The USA is following this very, very closely. I mean, when I was in Washington, D.C. a couple of months ago, I have to say that this was the question which was featured quite prominently in all the meetings I had in the White House, the State Department, and especially in the Congress. And it was just a couple of weeks ago, we had very important congressional delegation here. And first and foremost, what is the most important for the United States, as it is for us, to maintain the peace, respect the Good Friday Belfast Agreement, and to sort it out.
The USA have made it clear to you that they also do not support the UK's unilateral action.
What I heard from our US partners always was work together, work for the joint solutions, and especially in Congress, but also in the State Department and in the White House, they know that the protocol is the answer, but they want us to work out on how to smooth more the operation, how to address these unintended consequences. And this is exactly what we are proposing to do. But to deliver that, we need engagement and political will from London.
And Vice President, I want to get into a bit of the sort of sticking points between the UK and Brussels at the moment. But from a UK perspective, and you will know this, the protocol isn't working in that the UK government's job is to uphold the Good Friday Agreement. You just said it was the most important thing for all parties. But power sharing in Northern Ireland is not happening, and that's as a direct consequence of the protocol. I mean, the government has to do something if they can't get power sharing working in Northern Ireland. You accept that, don't you?
Of course, we do not want to interfere in the internal politics of UK and Northern Ireland. And I think it's for the people of Northern Ireland to decide on all these very important issues. Where we see our task is just to recall that the first two articles in the Protocol on Ireland, Northern Ireland, are about full respect of the Good Friday Belfast Agreement in all its dimensions, and second one is on full respect of territorial integrity and constitutional arrangements of the UK, and we fully respect that. Where we differ is the fact that we see that the protocol is actually the solution for maintaining the peace, for protecting the Good Friday Belfast Agreement, and for avoiding a hard border and bringing this additional prosperity to the Northern Ireland economy. And therefore, we are in, I would say, permanent contact with the key stakeholders in Northern Ireland just to present them our view of all these developments.
But the key here are the unionists. As you know, the Democratic Unionist Party will not enter the power-sharing arrangement with the protocol as it stands, and they want wholesale changes, hence the government's legislation. They need to get this work and they need to get the Northern Ireland Assembly. Have you spoken to the DUP about your proposals this week?
I have to say that we are in I would say, permanent contact with the key stakeholders in Northern Ireland, be it Northern Irish business leaders, civic society, but also political leaders. And I invited all political leaders to talk to us, and I'm ready to talk to them at any time. I have met in the past several times with Sir Geoffrey, and I was underlining one very important thing, that we want to deliver on all unintended consequences of the protocol, and we want to do it in a constructive way. What we do not need is a political victory in these debates.
What do you mean by that?
We are not here for political scoring, that the EU is right and the EU prevailed in these negotiations. We really want to solve the problem.
Vice President, you said, though, just to pick up on that the EU are not into political point scoring. Do you think that the UK government is partly doing this for political point scoring?
I cannot resist the impression that the tabling of the bill is politically driven. But it's not our role to comment on internal politics in the UK, and therefore our doors for the negotiations will always be open. I'm ready to talk to all political leaders in Northern Ireland, to all stakeholders, and to work on what is the only solution in this difficult situation. And this is joint approach. These are the permanent solutions.
Vice President, you just said that you think it could be something to do with domestic politics in the UK. Are you suggesting, what do you mean by that? What are you suggesting?
I think that what currently we would very much appreciate is the more of a political will to work on these issues jointly.
You don't think the Prime Minister of the UK does? You think that there's another agenda he's following here?
I wouldn't comment on the domestic politics in the UK, but what I can tell you is that already in February we proposed to our UK partners quite detailed roadmap, what we think we should discuss on technical expert level in the period of pre-election campaign in Northern Ireland, and until today we didn't get the response. So what I want to say, if this issue is so urgent, why we didn't use the time more efficiently, why we didn't work on these joint solutions. And
yesterday you announced you'd resume previously paused legal action against the UK for failing to implement the border checks for goods arriving from NI to GB. I put it to you that that doesn't really resolve anything. It just escalates the situation further.
What I have to say is that, as you know, we put our legal action in freezer last year, and it was also the gesture of a goodwill from our side, because we wanted to create conducive space for the negotiations. But as I told you, there was a radio silence from London since February. We got this unilateral draft bill, which is really damaging the trust in our relationship, and we just simply have to defend our interests. So we have to start the legal action. But again, what is very important to underscore, we would act proportionate, we would be gradual in our responses, because we want to keep doors open, and we still hope that we will get our UK partners back to the negotiating table.
Can you rule out a trade war? I think you're saying you can't.
What I want to say is that we've been building our new post-Brexit relationship on a very clear fundament. And first one was withdrawal agreement. Part of it is the protocol on Ireland and Northern Ireland. And on these two fundamental pieces, we built the trade and cooperation agreement. But if you pull the rug from under the feet of this construction, then of course we have a fundamental issue with the whole architecture, and therefore we cannot exclude anything.
So you can't exclude a trade war. If you're Boris Johnson in London listening to this, you're thinking, yeah, trade war could come in 3 years' time is the EU process, right? So 3 years' time is after the next election. I mean, in a way, politically, it's meaningless in that it's an empty threat, isn't it, at this point in negotiations?
We are not in the business of threats as a EU, and from the moment one, when we've been negotiating withdrawal agreement, protocol, TCA, we've been the only party, I have to say, which was bringing constructive ideas to the table. And we did it in the course of the last year, despite lots of unilateral actions taken by the UK, and we are doing it now. It was, I would say, a big part of our presentation yesterday was what we offer to solve this problem, how this can be done. And the propositions we put on the table will tick, I would say, all the boxes on what we hear from the Northern Ireland if it comes to SPS controls, if it comes to the customs procedures, and on top of it will bring back permanent solution, will bring back the access to the biggest trading bloc in the world, and I think would really calm down the atmospherics between the EU and the UK.
Let me put it another way then. You can't take the threat of a trade war off the table. I know you don't like the word threat, but you don't really think it's likely. You think that there can be a solution before each side. Neither side wants that as the outcome, do they? You think you can work this out?
Of course, it would be our preference. I mean, therefore we went into this very special, I would say, institutional and agreement setup with the UK, which are really unparalleled. As I would remind and recall once again, we ask the UK to perform the checks on the goods which are entering European single market. How much more we can demonstrate our trust, and we need, that this would be done according to the rules. And of course, we would prefer to have fructuous, normal relationship with the UK, but at the same time, we also have to defend our interests.
Vice President, I just want to bring you quickly on to something else regarding that on the checks. There would be some in the UK government that think they're not enforcing checks now and they just don't enforce any checks. So you're in a situation where the UK government won't enforce any checks on goods going north-south on the island of Ireland, so going from the UK into the European Union. What are you going to do if the UK government did that? Would you at any point put any checks on the border north-south, a hard border on the north-south? Is that a possibility? Do you absolutely rule that out?
I'm absolutely ruling out the hard border. And of course, this would be additional, I would say, illegality in our relationship, and we'll just discuss with the member states and with the European Parliament what should be the course of further action, because indeed we have to make sure that public health, not only of the people in the European Union, but also in the people in the Northern Ireland, is not under the threat. And here maybe one additional point which I would like to make. Until now, I have to say that the convergence between the rules in the UK and the EU been rather big. But if, of course, UK would proceed with this divergence agenda and the standards would simply be more wider apart, then it could be, of course, more and more problematic question, and therefore I think it's quite important to stick to what we agreed upon, that if it comes to Northern Ireland, it would have access to the single market, and that access is based on respecting the EU rules.
Just quickly, though, you've clearly ruled out a hard border on the island of Ireland, north-south. What about the idea of checkpoints or border posts? But you ruled out all of that, no checks, no cameras, nothing on the border.
I mean, we ask for the border points between GB and Northern Ireland, and that was
that's in the sea.
That was clearly the part of the agreement, and that's actually one issue which we are complaining about in our legal action. And this is how we agreed that we would solve, and therefore we want to stick to the international law, to the agreements we have signed.
Just to round up, how confident are you that this can be resolved? You did publish some suggestions on customs this week. It does seem that the UK intransigence has helped move the European Union a bit. Do you think that we can resolve this and that the European Union and the UK can properly move on and put Brexit to bed?
I think here we have to follow the very common rule, hope for the best, be prepared for the worst. This is what we will be doing here, and we will be permanently pointing to the huge advantages of our approach over unilateral proposals which came from the UK, because we really have the interests of people of Northern Ireland in heart. We absolutely want to make sure that they would benefit from the access to the single market, from having the possibility to export to 500 million people, and we want to provide them with legal certainty, with clarity, with stability, and for these goals we are ready to work with the UK government and with all political leaders in Northern Ireland.
OK, Vice President, thank you very much. I hope the talks do resume soon, and we'd love to talk to you again in a few months, see how things are going. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
And if you scan this QR code on screen right now, you can watch all of our interviews online and all of the previous episodes of the show if you so desire. Well, stay with us, because coming up next, Egyptian activist and filmmaker Sanaa Seif, who is campaigning to get her brother freed from a jail in Egypt. Welcome back. Alad Ab El Fattah has been in and out of an Egyptian jail since 2011. An activist, he had a prominent role in the Arab Spring uprising. After an appeal from the United Nations, he was released, but he's currently serving time in prison for a Facebook post criticising the government. His family are trying to get help from the UK government to get him freed. Earlier, I spoke to his sister Sanaa, currently living in the UK and once arrested and imprisoned herself, about their campaign. Sanaa, thanks for coming on the show today. We want to talk about your story today, but I want to talk to you first about your brother, Alaa, who's detained in Egypt. Before we get on to what's happening with him, can you tell me a bit about him?
Thank you for having me, Hers. Alaa publicly is known to be a programmer, writer, and a pro-democracy, secular human rights activist.
Yeah.
But as a person, like as a brother, he's my older brother. I'm the baby sister. So we're friends, but there's also this mentorship kind of dynamic. He's the person in the family he's a bit of a, like, he's always been kind of a nerd. He likes to read a lot. He's about everything, to know, engage with everything.
Can you tell me sort of what happened to him and how he ended up in prison, how he got out of prison and why he's back in prison now?
We were interested in the political situation in Egypt. My late father was a human rights lawyer, and Alaa, because he was a programmer and technologist, he was really interested in empowering people, like localizing tools, making them available in Arabic, and by that empowering people to communicate and to organize. That was pre the social media movement. And so when 2011 happened, he kind of became a prominent figure because of the work he did in the bloggers movement. And with the family background, we gained some prominence. And then in 2013, when the backlash happened and the military basically took charge, we became one of the, as a family, but Ale especially, we became one of the main targets of the regime.
So he went to prison in 2011. He was released, and he's now back in prison. Why does President Sisi see him as such a threat? Because he means something to other people, that he's a symbol of what rebellion, of an alternative future. He seems to be a real threat to the government, or they perceive him to be.
Yeah, it's something that we don't know for sure why. I mean, our assessment is that they kind of... We were known by a few people before the attack, like the vicious attack happened to us in 2013, but I think they kind of created their own... it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because they tried to set an example with Ale, and so they so viciously attacked him. And Ale was sentenced to 5 years for a demonstration, and a demonstration he did not organize, or the organizers actually went to court and showed evidence that they are the organizers, and the court decided to dismiss that.
So he served 5 years for that.
And he served 5.
And then he came out.
And he came out, and then they re-arrested him again and put him on new charges.
What
for? For a Facebook post. A Facebook post he did not write, a Facebook post he shared about human rights violations happening in a prison. So the details could be confusing and are not confusing but exhausting to tell and to listen to. But I think it's that keep building up.
So he was falsely. So there was what? It was a false imprisonment. The first time you would argue it was a false imprisonment, but the second time they kind of constructed a case to rearrest him.
Yeah, both times we constructed Ale, and actually in Egypt it's quite a known fact now that the legal things are just details that. Everybody knows that Ale is not... So technically, Ale is in prison for a Facebook post. But everybody knows that genuinely Ale is not in prison for a Facebook post. So he's in prison because he represents something. He represents something for a younger generation.
How's he doing in prison? Have you seen him?
Last time I saw Ale was in March before I left Cairo. My sister saw him last week. So the way we see Ale is... for the past 3 years, the visits are behind a glass shield with a phone speaker. Ale, in April 2nd, he started a hunger strike. So today would be day 75 of his hunger strike. I haven't seen him since the hunger strike, but what my sister explains to me is really terrifying because I was outside the country. Last visit, my sister came out. When I called her and my mom, they really sounded distressed. They said, he looks very weak. It's like he's only skin on bones. Mona, my sister, because of how shocked she was, she couldn't eat since. And she just told me, I feel like I have to use my body as a portal to show that what's happening to Ale, because the Egyptian authorities are using the fact that they can hide him in a dark cell and not show to the...
So has Mona gone on a hunger...
Today would be her fourth day.
That's difficult.
Okay, well, sorry. I should explain from the beginning, right?
It's fine,
sorry.
it's fine.
Okay, so what led Ale to the strike was that for the past few years, his conditions were really, really bad. He wasn't allowed anything. He was isolated from any outside input. So he wasn't allowed books, time outside of his cell. They wouldn't even allow him a clock to be aware of the time of the day.
Right.
And he was in a maximum security prison that is built on the whole premise of the war on terrorism, while he's not on terrorism charges. He's actually on a misdemeanor. And it's a freedom of expression issue, but it's also like legally a misdemeanor. So we kept on filing complaints, but it led to nothing. So Ale decided he was feeling really that, because in prison you don't have agency over anything but your body.
Yeah.
So when he was totally fed up, when he couldn't take it anymore, he decided to start a hunger strike.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah, so on day 55, when they made this little compromise from their behalf, he also made a little compromise and started taking 100 calories a day. He said, I switched to a Gandhi-style strike.
Right, OK.
So a human being should take around 2,000 calories a day. Ale takes 100 calories. If his conditions improve or if he gets consular access, he could make more compromises.
Just before we get to his release and your campaign, I just wanted to ask you about your time in prison, because you, Nofar, you were also arrested, weren't you? Can you tell us what happened to you?
Yeah, so I was imprisoned over the past 10 years, 3 times. Each of those times has its story, but they all come down to one thing, to the fact that as family, we're being punished because we're vocal about the assaults or the violations that happened to Ale. So this last time, I served a 1.5-year sentence. I was arrested after trying to get a letter into my brother.
Let's get back to your brother. He spent a lot of time in detention. He's got a sentence until 2027, I believe. How hopeful are you of getting him out? And have you received any assistance from the UK government to help you? Your mother was born in the UK and you are all dual citizens, and so he does fall under the remit of the UK government.
Yeah, for the first time now, in the last 9 years, I'm actually very hopeful, although we are at a moment of desperation, but we're also at a moment of possibility. Ale's case is very complicated if you think of it locally, but there is precedence. And there is a law that was issued in 2015 for dual nationals, for specifically cases like Ale, and there is precedent with the US, with Australia, and with France, that they would basically, for political prisoners, they would basically renounce their other citizenship and be deported to their other country of residence. And of course, in Ale's case, if he was deported here, none of the case file here wouldn't be. I mean, he wouldn't be considered a criminal. This is obviously a freedom of expression issue.
You need the Foreign Secretary to get involved.
Yes, we need the Foreign Secretary, and I'm confused. I'm not sure why, because I can see that there is a lot of sympathy. I can see that there is support. We're always in touch with the embassy, and so I'm confused as to why we haven't met with the Foreign Secretary yet.
So you haven't met with the Foreign Secretary. If you could ask the Prime Minister or the Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, to do one thing, what would it be?
To meet with us, basically. But ultimately, I know that Ale, a firm phone call from the Prime Minister, followed by a robust negotiation from the FCDO, will get Ale out. I know that. We've seen that with the French. We've seen that with the Americans.
You've recently joined forces with Richard Ratcliffe, and you've also just had more than 1,000 celebrities, from Dame Judi Dench to Mark Ruffalo, Carrie Mulligan, urging Liz Truss, Foreign Secretary, and her US counterpart Anthony Blinken to use their diplomatic force to try and get your brother freed. You've got momentum now, but you still think the British government aren't really listening? Is it just not a priority for them because they've got other more important in their views?
I'm really confused. That's why I'm really confused. I see sympathy and we have momentum and we have solidarity and support from other governments in the West. And relationships between Egypt and Britain are very strong. This is not something that's going to jeopardize those relationships. Actually, this gives the UK leverage. That's why I'm genuinely puzzled as to why we're not getting the attention we need from the Foreign Secretary.
How hopeful are you that you might be able to see your brother not behind a glass partition, but actually face to face by the end of this year, say?
Again, I'm now hopeful more than ever. Ale is not, unfortunately. Ale is, but I understand that from his perspective, Ale believes he's going to die in prison. I'm hopeful. I'm really hopeful, and I think it's easy. It's simple if we get to the right people, and I think there is precedence. We know the recipe as to how to do it. French did it, the US did it, and UK is definitely capable of doing it.
Okay. Well, Sanaa, thank you so much for telling us your story, and I hope your brother gets out soon and gets healthy and gets to see you and his son and all his family again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Well, we got a response from the UK Foreign Office about this case. The UK government continues to raise Alaa Abdel Fattah's case at the highest levels of the Egyptian government. We are working urgently to secure consular access to Mr Abdel Fattah. We are also concerned by reports that he's on a sustained hunger strike. The welfare of British nationals in detention remains a high priority. Well, stay with us, because coming up next, former First Minister of Scotland, Alex Salmond. The former First Minister of Scotland, Alex Salmond, once led the country in an independence referendum. Under the leadership of Nicola Sturgeon, his protégé, there's a new bid for Scotland to break away from the UK. But she faces pressure from her former boss, who is demanding more action on the plans. Earlier, I spoke to Mr Salmond about his role in Scottish politics since leaving office and the controversy around him. Mr Salmond, thanks for joining us on the show today. I'm actually, as you know, I'm in Brussels, you're in London. I'm here because I was talking to Maroš Šefčovič today about some of the consequences of the UK leaving the European Union, a union it's been in for nearly 50 years. This week, your successor, First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, launched plans for that second independence referendum. What did you think of her proposals?
Well, I mean, apart from the comparison with other countries, which is a perfectly fair thing to do because it's right and proper to make the point that other small European countries are doing much better than the UK is doing economically. There wasn't really much proposals beyond that, but of course we're promised a series of papers to come. I suppose, like many people in the national movement, I'm just pleased that the starting gun has eventually been fired, because we've been waiting on it for some considerable time.
And do you think she's the right person to lead this campaign, and would you share a platform with her?
Well, yes, to the second part of your question. In terms of being the right person, she's the inevitable person to lead the campaign. She's the head of the Scottish Government. The Scottish Government have a prime role in the independence referendum. I don't think they should have the only role, incidentally. I think it's really, really important there are voices from out with government who are proclaiming independence.
I asked you partly because obviously there's kind of quite a lot of personal animosity between the two of you at the moment, or is that now being cleared up?
Well, I mean, whatever personal difference between myself and Nicola, I mean, they are insignificant compared to the national cause of Scotland becoming independent, to which I and Nicola Sturgeon have devoted our lives. So I don't think you would find any personal difficulties coming in the way of something which is much bigger and much greater than any two individuals.
I just want to ask you about what you think Brexit has done to this possible solution for Scotland. Nicola Sturgeon has made it clear she still wants to join the European Union and the single market. That's what you once wanted, I think. But Brexit's changed your mind, is that right?
Well, I've changed my mind in the sense that I think it would be a better option for Scotland, at least initially, but perhaps in the long term, to be in the European Free Trade Association, the four-member association. I mean, there are many advantages of that, but I think the prime advantage is, well, it takes perhaps 5 years to join the European Union, whereas EFTA, well, it takes about 3 months to join. Having the security of EFTA membership strikes me as a very good idea indeed. Then you can decide over the longer term whether the people of Scotland want to go in to the European Union.
Brexit, you would acknowledge, has complicated the picture a bit for Scotland. Would you agree with that? I mean, Nicola Sturgeon got into quite a lot of hot water or difficulties in that press conference when people were repeatedly asking her about what we're seeing now in Northern Ireland and the read across for Scotland, and is there going to be a hard border between Scotland and England? That's a massive problem, isn't it? I mean, Scots might want to be independent. They might not want a hard border.
Beth, you've said complication, difficulties and hard border in the same question. I mean, I think part of the difficulties Nicola had at the press conference was they haven't published their proposals on Europe yet. If we're taking the Northern Irish example, what the border of Northern Ireland has meant with their total access to the single market has been prosperity for Northern Ireland in relative terms, at least for the first time in recorded economic statistics. Northern Ireland is top of the table in terms of the nations and regions of the United Kingdom. In this interview, we're not solving the problems of Northern Ireland, but we're merely looking at the Northern Irish example to see what it tells us about Scotland. And what it tells us, and nobody would describe, nobody serious person, but perhaps the Unionist press in Scotland might describe the Minister of Border in the Irish Sea as a hard border.
Do you accept, though, that there would be checks on goods between England and Scotland, or you think there's a way to avoid that? Because...
Well, there certainly wouldn't be checks at the border. I mean, the maximum you'd have, certainly on an EFTA proposal...
Checks on goods moving between the two countries.
Yeah, a point of source and point of origin. Yes, that's one of the consequences. Now, there are advantages of that. The primary advantage would be that you'd have full access to a single market of 500 million people. So, there are pros and cons, swings and roundabouts. All I'm pointing out to you is in Northern Ireland, in economic terms, if we leave to one side the politics,
yes,
the pros have been much greater than the cons.
How likely do you think there will be a referendum before the next general election, then?
Well, I mean, I take the Scottish Government at its word. I mean, it's a no ifs, no buts commitment now that there's going to be a referendum by October of next year. So the national movement in Scotland are looking forward to taking part in that referendum. You
could see a scenario where Holyrood legislate for a referendum, but they don't hold a referendum. Could you see that as a possibility?
I see many scenarios, but the first thing to do is to ask for it, to let Boris Johnson deny it, to let him deny the will of the Scottish Parliament, and then take effective political action to change his mind. As I say, my view is that Boris Johnson is not a strong political figure. I think, it's an open question as if he'll even be Prime Minister by the autumn. And therefore, this seems to me a very good time to exert political and democratic pressure.
You were taken to court in 2020 on a series of sexual assault charges. You were acquitted of all of those charges. And at the time, some of your allies suggested you'd been a victim of a witch hunt within the Scottish National Party. You then went on with allegations that there was a conspiracy against you designed to cause your downfall and even imprisonment. That was unproven. We had the Holyrood inquiry and the investigation by James Hamilton. Both strongly criticised Nicola Sturgeon, but they didn't say there was an organised conspiracy. It was a torrid time. Have you come to terms with all of that, put it behind you? Is that saga now over?
Well, it certainly is not going to get in the way of an independence campaign. I mean, there's a police investigation ongoing into illegal leaks of material from the Scottish Government. There's also a Crown investigation or a Crown review of possible perjury at the High Court trial. And now these things must be allowed to take their course. They're in the hands of the police and the Crown Office. And obviously I've given evidence to both of these because I would like to see them come to a conclusion.
Has it politically damaged you? The reason I ask is that Nicola Sturgeon said, from her own conversations with you, and I'm going to quote her, she said his behaviour was inappropriate, and she said she'd searched your testimony for signs of reflection and recognition of your behaviour, but there was not a single word to acknowledge that. Do you acknowledge that your behaviour towards women at times was inappropriate? I'm
not going to go over what was well gone over, well-trod material, Beth. That's in the hands of a police investigation, in the hands of the Crown Office. And nothing I'm going to say is going to interfere in these ongoing... No, this is really important, Beth. There's a police investigation into criminal leaks from within the Scottish Government. There's a Crown Office investigation into possible perjury at the trial. I am not going to say anything that cuts across these investigations. Clearly, they're not investigations into me, but other people are entitled to the same natural justice as I am, and therefore I'm not going to follow you down this road. What I will follow you down is answering any questions you wish on the independence campaign, which I'm delighted to participate in.
I need to ask you this in light of what's happening in Ukraine. You only gave up your Russia Today show in February. You started doing it in 2017. That was after years of reprimands towards the channel from Ofcom, high-profile resignations from employees, sick of being made to give out the Kremlin line. Yet you took that job. Why? And now, in light of what's happened subsequently, do you regret that? Do you think, again, that has politically tarnished you?
Well, Beth, in terms of reprimands by Ofcom, Sky Television has many, many more than RT managed, incidentally. That's just a fact. Until at least the last 17 in a day, which was done in March. In terms of my programme, I had total editorial independence, and nobody, I think, would ever suggest that programme was anything other than fair and balanced and gave everybody a chance to speak and put forward their point of view. And there was no interference in that programme. Not even, for example, when I interviewed Peter Tatchell about his experience in campaigning for gay rights during the World Cup, nobody said boo to it from RT. Obviously, I suspended the programme and then made that permanent on the Russian invasion of Ukraine because I thought it was impossible to conduct a current affairs programme in a wartime environment. But in terms of my experience with RT as a broadcaster, I had no complaints or difficulties. In terms of Russia's foreign policy, I'm afraid my thoughts on that are that illegal invasions of other countries never work. But then, of course, my consistency in opposing illegal invasions is rather better than other politicians. I mean, I've opposed illegal invasions of countries regardless of who was doing the invading. Very few people can say that.
You're famously a betting man. What are the odds of an independent Scotland in your lifetime?
Oh, heavy odds on. I mean, the Royal Ascot's on today, even without Her Majesty the Queen, unfortunately. But Royal Ascot's on today. I think if independence in my lifetime was a runner, it would be heavy odds on in the Gold Cup. OK, Alex Salmond, thanks so much for talking to me. I appreciate your time. Not at all, Beth. Thank you. Anytime.
Alex Salmond there. Well, that's all for today's show. Thank you to all of our guests, Sanaa Seif, Alex Salmond and Maroš Šefčovič. And thank you for watching.